John Stossel, welcome to Dad Saves America. I am so excited for this. You have no idea.
I can't imagine what idea you would have, but I have no idea.
So first of all, let's start with something simple. You look great. You are you a vampire? How are you? You look incredible.
I chose my parents carefully. I had a childhood because I was half the size of all the other kids, late to mature. When the boys were talking like that in the locker room, I was talking like this, and it sucked to look young then, but it's good now.
I understand, if I remember correctly, that you grew up with a stutter. Am I remembering that right?
I still have a stutter. I have it largely under control, obviously. But I did have struggled with stuttering for a long time. It's why I ended up as a libertarian, maybe because I became a consumer reporter to avoid being at the news conferences competing with the other political reporters where I might have humiliated myself trying to get a question out. So I wanted my own little niche, became a consumer reporter, watched government promise to fix consumer problems, and then gradually saw they made them worse. And that woke me up.
What about it is a crazy thing to have a stutter and end up going into television at all, or into something that will involve a lot of talking. So how did that happen? How did that happen? How did you end up? You have been in this media business for a very long time. You have legions of fans, myself among them. What was the first step into journalism, or into writing, or into any of this? Were you in the high school paper?
No, as Hayek would have said, it's all spontaneous order, happenstance, how most things happen. I was graduating from college. I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. I went to every job interview I could get that came to Princeton, where I was at the time. Mostly because if they liked you, they offered you a free trip to Milwaukee for the Bank of Milwaukee, or Chicago for Sears Roebuck talked about it. In a year, you could be a brand manager. And one of the companies was King Broadcasting in Seattle. And they said, come, you can work for the circulation department of Seattle Magazine. And by the time I got there, the magazine had folded, and they said, we want to work in our TV newsroom in Portland, Oregon. And I said, okay. I hadn't really watched TV news. I worked on the Daily Princetonian, the school newspaper, but I was on the business side. I once wrote an article, and the writer said, leave the writing to us. Had no intention of becoming any kind of journalist. And I worked in that newsroom for a couple of years, researching stories for the anchors and sometimes writing them. And then they said, well, go in the air. I can't go in the air. I'm a stutterer. Oh, you barely stutter. And like many stutterers, I hid it. I substituted synonyms when I felt a block coming on. But they pushed me into that. And as long as I wasn't doing live work, the editors could snip out the stutters. And I was in journalism, and I stuck to it because it was kind of a cool job.
All right, real quick. If you like what you're seeing and you want to see more, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell. It lets YouTube know that you want to see more Dad Saves America, and it helps spread the word. So it's one of the best things you can do to support what we're doing. And now, back to the show. I had Matt Taibbi on the show recently, and we were talking a lot about journalism. And one of the things he said is that
I hear you talked to him for 3 hours or something.
Yeah,
I read that somewhere.
I will abuse your time as well, John Stossel, if you'll let me. But
he's an interesting guy, I have to say. I wanted to interview him he didn't get back to us, so.
Oh no!
I'm gonna copy his column anyway.
I'm gonna make that introduction. He is hard to track down.
No, in fact, don't, because if he doesn't agree to talk, then I can put his words to video, and that might even work out better.
Well, like you, he describes himself as struggling with speaking, and that he actually went into writing because both his parents were like in the news business and were on camera talent. And he was like, "Oh, I'm a terrible speaker, so I'll go into writing." But one of he talked about reporting as being something that wasn't this high credentialed job like it is now, where you go to a school for journalism and get a PhD in nonsense, but something that was like a working class job. When you first got into it, is that how I mean, you didn't go to school for journalism. Um, you were thinking about maybe going to work for Sears Roebuck, and instead you went into this. What was your sense of what the industry was? Like, who were your peers? Um, what was like the culture of
There were a lot of
journalism?
PhD types. It was mostly English majors who were interested in journalism and liberal politics.
Even then, has it? How has it changed from your perspective on that front? The business of journalism, the newsroom.
Not much. I think whatever it is, how brain parts split us, that the conservatives and libertarians, I'm not so sure. The conservatives, anyway, they are engineers and farmers and contractors, people building things. And people on the left, more of us tend to be writers, people who sit around and write. And if you're farming, you don't have time to write letters to the editor, let alone write columns. And that's part of it. People who want to leave people alone and do their thing are politically different from the people who believe government can fix life for people.
You've interviewed so many people along the way, just and spent a lot of time just out in the field talking to just man on the street. What has that taught you about like Americans and about sort of like the people's just gut receptivity to the ideas of liberty? Like where do you shake out now as you look back on, on that human nature question?
People are not very receptive to the idea. It seems selfish and cruel to the poor and the weak. Once I woke up to the ideas of liberty, I thought, oh, yes, of course, this is so obvious. And now that I'm going to make videos about it, the videos will convince people who don't think that way. And I was so wrong. I barely convinced my wife of 40 years. She still says, oh, but what about this in the Times? And you need government for this. It's ingrained in people in some way to want mommy, daddy to take care of us. And maybe that's it. We grow up in a family where mommy and daddy keep us safe. And through evolution, we grew up in a tribe of 100, 200 people. And if you didn't do what the elders said about growing the food, you starved and died and didn't give birth to us. So we're programmed to trust a government.
Does that that makes a lot of sense. And yet we still have a fair amount of liberty in this country and in the West and in the world to varying degrees. How do you account for that? If our nature, when you're just out on the street, and it feels like it's not that popular, how do we have any personal liberty at all? Like, how do you account for that difference?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. We have laboratory experiments in countries. We have the Soviet Union. We have these badly governed countries where people suffer around the world. You'd think maybe people have learned from that. I thought the fall of the Soviet Union would have ended discussion about socialism. Obviously, it hasn't. The founders set limits in the Constitution, and that made America a role model. I assume some people see the United States and say, well, that's working. Maybe we should have limited government, which here, it's at least it's limited compared to Europe and
Yeah.
Latin America. But you're right; it's not natural.
It's I think which area do you think is the hardest to make the case for leave me the heck alone and I'll leave you alone and we'll both be happier? Like, is it is it free speech? Is it the economic domain? I like where have you found it the hardest to make the argument for liberty, for personal sovereignty?
Safety regulation. I mean, how can you argue against this rule meant to protect the children?
It's funny because that takes you back to the earliest days, right? I mean, that was where that's what your consumer, you spent so much time in consumer reporting. Let's go back there, talk about that. Because that was kind of where you were.
That was one. It was one of the places where I was, true, doing consumer reports, and this is going to kill you, and that's going to kill you. And I gradually started to think, gee, we can't worry about everything, and we ought to put more emphasis on the stuff that kills a lot of people. And so I spent almost a year studying what kills people in America, and I had a chart on my desk listed the number of deaths. And I do remember one turning point when 2020 producer came in, and we got to do a story on Bic lighters. Bic lighters were spontaneously catching fire in people's pockets, and it killed 4 Americans over the past 4 years. It did happen. And this story, like so many of these stories, came from one of these personal injury lawyers who get rich off screaming about safety risks. And they use the power we give only to lawyers, subpoena power, discovery, to take stuff, all the papers from a company, and amidst 20,000 pages, they found some incriminating looking bad stuff, and they just hand that to journalists. And the journalist wins Emmy Awards going on TV saying, look, this company is evil and they did that. In this case, it was Bic lighters, but I had my death list, and I thought, well, 4 people over 4 years. Okay, yeah, let's do that story, but let's do plastic bags first, because they kill 200 Americans over 4 years. Or buckets, 5-gallon buckets. They kill about 12 Americans every 4 years, mostly 2-year-old boys who fall into them and drown. It's a big country. If we scare people about the ants, they can't pay attention when the elephants come. And they looked at me like I was nuts, and they got Bob Brown to do that story. But from there, I kept pushing ABC, and they eventually gave me an hour special that I wanted to call We're Scaring You to Death. And it made the argument that all this regulation, that above all, wealth, if you look at the data, wealthier is healthier. If you live in a wealthy country, you live longer. If individually you have a little more money, if you have a job, your life is better. You live a better, longer life. And regulation makes countries a little less wealthy. If it takes longer to open the supermarket, that makes us all a little poorer. And increasingly, the regulation had gotten to be ridiculous. So 2 producers quit rather than work on that. They made me change the name from We're Scaring You to Death to Are We Scaring You to Death?
Of course.
And they insisted that the Nightline half hour be turned over to a live discussion from critics, which we did. And to their surprise, the special rated well, and that changed my life, because then my contract was up shortly after, and to keep me, ABC agreed to give me primetime specials, and I was able to push libertarian messages.
I mean, that's one of the things that's so incredible about your career is that you really were at the height of traditional broadcast journalism, pulling in tens of millions of viewers with those specials. I mean, there's an entire generation who got to know you and your famous mustache through traditional journalism, traditional broadcast. How you know, there's a lot we all talk about how the trust in the media is below that of Congress, right? Has it always just been that way? You know, there's a little bit of a romance for the times of Walter Cronkite. Do you have that romance in you at all, or is it like, nah, it was always kind of a mess, kind of an ideological sinkhole?
Well, you have several questions in there. Yeah, it was a mess, and there was a lot of sloppy thinking. I remember coming my first job in Portland, Oregon to New York City. I said, okay, this is the big time. I'll really learn how it's done. And I found they did less research in the New York City newsroom than we had in Portland, Oregon. But I got to enjoy the good part of government control, and that government to protect poor people from evils of cable TV, because some couldn't afford cable TV. They basically banned it and banned other channels. We only had most people had 3, 4, 5 channels. So I would get off an airplane and people would, oh, you're what's his name? And they were so excited. They dropped their coffee cup, and that was cool. But ideologically, yes, it was always successful. It was always leftists. No, I'm sorry, well-meaning leftists, but they all agreed on that abortion should be legal, something I agree with. There should be more gun control. There should be more safety regulation. Government has to have programs to help the poor people, and on and on and on.
You were one of those people, right? So take me back to what was in your head when you were doing this reporting about consumer safety and being the guy saying, look at these horrible companies. Look at these exploiters of your ignorance, Joe Q public. Where were you coming from, like, motivationally, that made you feel like you were doing the good thing with that work? Because, you know, you were one of these people, right?
Intuitively, I assume companies made more money if they could fool people and cheat people. And that, when I started this consumer reporter, and I was really the first one on television. Consumer reporting was not a field then. And I covered business, and I was happy to cover the scams, and there were some. The need for these consumer reporters has kind of been taken away by this thing called the internet, where you get much more consumer feedback. But we did some useful reporting there. It took me a long time to realize that the way to get really rich and the way capitalism works is when the company serves the customer well, gives them what they want. And if you cheat people, word gets out and you don't do as well. For me, turning point was, we would do these stories where we'd take a car with a loose part or TV set with a loose part to a bunch of repair shops and see what they'd say. And most would say, oh, loose part, put it back in, no charge. And some would say, oh, we got to keep it over the weekend. And they charge several $100s. I would come back and pick it up and say, this just had a loose tube. You cheated. No, we would never do that. Oh, yeah. And we played the hidden tape from our secret cameras. And today the lawyers stop you from invading people's privacy that way. And maybe that's a good thing, but we had the evidence, and those were good TV moments. And politicians in Oregon called up and said, oh, that's great reporting. And we're going to create a consumer affairs department to address this. And young me was so proud. These politicians were paying attention to this kid in his 20s. And I was going to protect consumers. But being a stutterer and hiding from advancement, I stayed on the beat, and we would do the story again. And to get the same results, made me think, well, what's the Department of Consumer Affairs doing? And went there, and there would be this dreary building where bored people were being paid to process license applications. You had to now get a license to be a TV repairman. And intuitively, we like that. We license dogs, we license drivers. We think it makes
Interior
us
designers.
safer.
So placing flowers in a particular location in a room now needs the government approval in like 30 states or something like that.
And it's very true. And they can justify, well, if they don't know what they're doing, it might fall down and hurt somebody, or the consumer will waste money. There's always an argument. And I would do the story again, there'd be no change. And all the licensing department accomplished was to make things cost more. If you were someone who didn't speak good English, you could never understand what you had to do to be legal. So you had to hire a lawyer. That added to costs and slowed everything down. Some people just didn't get a license, so that increased the black market, which encourages criminality. And I kept seeing this here and there. And I thought, what I'd been taught at Princeton and what I'm reading in the New York Times, it doesn't make sense in the real world. When I finally discovered Reason magazine, first I read the conservative media, and they wanted to police the world, which didn't make sense to me, and police bedrooms. It really didn't make sense to me. And but then I found Reason magazine and became a libertarian. That was, these people understand it better than I do.
I remember early in my, I went through this process that, recent. In fact, we're sitting here talking because you reached out to me with an email pointing out that you'd used the Keynes Hayek rap videos in one of your videos, which, of course, my heart leaps when I see these emails from you, John. And it was during that time, the financial crisis, that I really started getting into all of these ideas more deeply. And reading Hayek and all of this stuff, because that was what we were talking about. Oh, the boom and bust and stimulus and Keynes is back. Out of all of these different thinkers, these economists, these public intellectuals, who's your favorite? And has it changed over time?
Well, Hayek and Mises started it, but I'm not smart enough to get through Human Action. I tried. It just is tedious to me. But Hazlitt and Thomas Sowell and Milton Friedman made it accessible.
Who is today's Milton Friedman from your perspective? Do we have a Milton Friedman today? And maybe we have a lot of them, but besides you, John
do we have a
Stossel?
Milton? And I don't know. Art Laffer pushed these ideas. Steve Moore pushes them. I'm sure there are Steve Forbes, sort of, but now even Forbes magazine is eclectic and running articles about the advantages of the minimum wage. I don't know. It's just me. You got me and no one else.
That's it. It's fair enough.
And you.
Would you, speaking of sort of these differences, these ideological differences on the right, let's say, do you consider yourself a right-winger?
No. I mean, I grew up in the liberal world, and to be a right-winger is to be a religious, I don't want to say fanatic, to be a very religious person who doesn't want to leave people alone let them do what they want to do, and wants to ban abortion, and some abortion should be limited up. But I think most should be legal. If you're living inside someone, I think that woman ought to get to decide what becomes of you, at least until you leave her body. And they just came across as stuffy repressors. And the liberals were more fun and more for the good things of life.
We're on different sides on the abortion issue for sure. We can come back and talk about that a little bit maybe. But in fact, actually, I would say that's one issue that even among libertarians often divides folks, because you can make the argument, look, yes, sure, you're living inside the woman's body, but you're a person. So what about your liberty, right? So let's actually linger on that for a little bit since you brought it up. This is probably the issue that maybe most divides libertarians philosophically. So you've said your position. How have you sort of, how do you understand sort of the different arguments out there among otherwise like-minded people?
I mean, I haven't studied it carefully. I don't think I have much to add, except to say that I noticed that the left doesn't even want to talk about stuff. But I forget the name of the woman who helped start one of the anti-abortion movements. They had me to their conference. They invited me to speak and say those things and to argue with me. They were open to discussion, while the left is not.
Why do you think
But
that is?
look, I have no great insights except to say you have to draw a line somewhere. And, are we not going to allow... It's such a treacherous area. I don't claim to be brilliant about this. I made this arbitrary distinction. To me, if you're living inside someone, that's where the line should be. If a state wants to say, no, you're a human at age 6 months, that seems reasonable to me. If they want to ban abortion at 2 months, that seems unreasonable. But I have no expertise or insight in this area.
It's refreshing for you to say that, right? Because I feel like there's so many issues, especially hot button ones like this, where it's like we do put these opinions of ours into our identity, and they become impossible to like even admit that maybe we're wrong, or maybe we don't really know enough to have the opinion we currently have. How do you think about that? How do you think about maintaining an open mind, especially as you get older and you've seen a lot of stuff and you feel like you kind of know what you believe?
I'm sure I'm guilty of a lot of that, but also, I make a video every week where I cover the other side and listen to their arguments. So every week I have my biases, but I have to go up against people who think differently and see where the arguments fall out. So my ideas get tested regularly.
Has there been in the past several years anything that has been particularly testing? Have you found yourself up against some edge cases where you're like, wow, that's
Well, since I've become a libertarian, not many, because liberty just works. Leaving people alone makes most people's lives better. I mean, one coming against the wall was gun control. I grew up in a place where, at ABC News, where everybody agreed gun control was just obviously necessary. And one of my producers was Maxim Lott.
Yeah.
His father's John Lott, who wrote More Guns, Less Crime. And said, what? How can this be? And looking at his data, holy mackerel, my assumption is just wrong. We could never really show that there was less crime, but there might have been, and there certainly wasn't more crime. And I remember asking Al Sharpton for that show, what would life be like if anybody could carry a concealed weapon? And he said, oh, there would be blood in the streets. And then I was able to say, well, that's the law in most of the world. That's the law in most American states. And
right.
There isn't blood on the streets, and there isn't more murder in those places. There isn't less, it turned out, but there isn't more. And he slimed his way out of it, as politicians are good at doing. But the level of assumption and ignorance is vast. I mean, another big one for me was at Princeton, my professors explained to my open brain that, and this was all very logical, still is logical, What an outrage that in this rich country, some people are poor and don't have enough. And we have to we can't just give them money because some will waste that. So we're going to create programs that will teach them to take care of themselves and give them money and food stamps because you don't want people to starve. And everybody's for that in my world. But now we've spent how many trillion? I forget what it is, but it's in the trillions.
Yeah, it is in the trillions for sure.
And we've created a new class of dependent people that never existed before. If you look at the poverty rate in America, it was going down before the war on poverty. Americans were lifting themselves out of poverty on their own. And the war on poverty sped that progress for about 7 years. And since then, progress has stopped because we taught people to be dependent. Most Black children were raised by a married mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
Not anymore, because government gave you money if you didn't have married parents. This has been a horrible, destructive program, and yet most Americans would say, we got to have it. You can't live without it. And we keep creating more. My Stossel TV video this week was government paying for daycare. Daycare got so expensive, we need government to pay for it, as if that makes it free when government has no money of its own, so it just takes it from us.
You know, one of the things you do great is say, but don't we need these programs? I mean, aren't people going to starve? I mean, look, I go out in the streets and I see people pushing carts full of dirty clothes and living under overpasses, and we're such a rich country. And, you know, if the church
Yeah, well, you live in Austin. We don't have that in New York City.
Oh, yeah, of course. I lived in New York City for long enough that I remember quite a few of these people, although it is funny how few you see because it's so brutal there. But what's your response to people that push back and say, John, you're being a utopian. Look at all these people who are in need of help and they can't help themselves. And we have all these churches in America and they aren't picking up the slack. So this is why the government programs exist.
I say the government programs do more harm than good. And there are 3 ways to help people: through the market, and these people obviously are not there, through government, or through private charity. And private charity isn't great. If you look at these 3 categories, it's interesting in that greedy business will fire someone if they're not working hard because they want to make money. And they certainly don't want to have a slacker so that they lose money and all go out of business and lose their jobs. So they really are careful to adapt every day, every minute. The owner of the business is looking to make another buck. The charity, less so. You have a worker who's not doing a good job. Nobody fires that person because it's hard to fire a person. And then you have government, where it's illegal to fire the person because there's civil service rules or union rules. And so the slacker works right next to you. And maybe in the first year of a government program, Mom Donnie's grocery store, maybe, you'll have eager beavers doing a pretty good job. But what would your attitude be 5 years later when the slacker is still getting paid what you're getting paid and doing nothing? Why should I work so hard to try to accomplish the goal? To go back to your question, how do we help the poor? I think charities will do a better job than poor people. I give money, for example, to something in New York called the Doe Fund.
Yeah.
It's
a great program.
Help people who get released from prison, teach them. You want to stay in our free dorm? You must work in one of these jobs and learn how to work and learn how to get up in the morning. It's tough love. The Salvation Army does that. In their case, it's religious. I think you need to follow some religious demands. But whatever it is, those programs work much better than government does.
You brought up Mom Donnie's grocery store. As we're sitting here, I think there's been recent news. Now, this is just like remembering off Twitter, so maybe it's inaccurate, but it was something like his first city
No, it's
grocery
true.
store is going to cost like $30 million and not be like open until 2029 or am I remembering these details right? Did you see
They
this?
built the Empire State Building in 1 year. It's going to take 3 years to open his grocery store.
Yeah, it's so just for the person that sees that and hears that, you've described some parts of it, but why? Why does the richest city in the world, isn't there like, it can't build a grocery store in less than 3 years and $30 million? It's like, I know for a fact that the early Whole Foods didn't cost $30 million. So John Mackey is a mutual friend of both of us,
Well,
and
that
that's not true.
was in Austin where you are. There are fewer regulations and more land available cheap. But yes, obviously it's ridiculous and it's useful. We need models of failure like Mondami. Sorry, it's in my town. And I'm sorry people don't learn. But, the Empire State Building was built in a year, but a bunch of workers died. So you pass safety rules. Before the worker can go up the beam, you have to have this and this and this. And they keep piling on. It's sclerosis, like clogging of the arteries, and it's very hard to get rid of. Germany and Japan became the economic leaders of the world when I was graduating from college. Why? Why was that? Well, part of it is they have a work ethic, but part of it was because we'd bombed them to smithereens during the war. They'd gotten rid of all their regulations and their guilds. They started over with new, fresh rules, and that allowed them to prosper. Milton Friedman used the example of Hong Kong. Why is Hong Kong? Well, let me tell the story this way. It was one of the videos I did that I was most proud of. Like, why is America successful? I addressed an auditorium full of high school kids in New Jersey and said, why is New Jersey wealthy and India's poor? And they said, well, India's overpopulated. And in fact, the population density of India happens to be the same as that of New Jersey, which is why we picked New Jersey. So they kept guessing natural resources and so forth. But the answer is limited government. And Hong Kong's a good example because they don't have any natural resources. It's just a rock. It is a port, but no other natural resources. Yeah. And Hong Kong went from third world to first world in something like 30 years. How did they do that? They did that because the British rulers at the time did something wonderful. They enforced rule of law, and you need that. You need people to punish thieves and killers so people can feel safe in their homes. And you need someone to establish that if you bought a home, that deed is valid and it's yours. One reason Africa stays poor is you don't want to build a factory because the people may steal what you make or the dictator may take the whole factory. So you just don't build it. So you need basic rule of law to protect persons and property. But then the British rulers did something American politicians rarely do. Nothing. They sat around and drank tea. And they left free people alone with rule of law. And left alone, people in Hong Kong went from third world to roughly our level of wealth in very few years. You'd think the world would have learned from that. You'd think the Chinese communists who had to open their economy to capitalism to stop people from starving would have said, okay, there's a message in Hong Kong we should learn from. You'd think American young people would have learned it, but they don't.
I think it may have, I think just this week or in our, we have our Slack threads where we're always posting things to talk about. And a YouTuber named Hassan Piker was giving a talk, I think at Yale, decrying that the fall of the Soviet Union was the greatest catastrophe of the modern age. He is, he's ridiculous and fairly repulsive as a person when you watch the way he talks about other people. Including,
he's popular.
He's popular. He's popular.
Better looking than we are. So
speak for yourself, John Stossel.
Not repulsive to his audience.
But yeah, so you're there in New York City. We have the 20th century and its death count. We have the fall of the Soviet Union and all these other things. We have North Korea, South Korea, East Germany, West Germany, all this stuff. And yet, it seems like the share of young people just straight up saying, I'm a communist, not even a democratic socialist, which is still just basically communism, but I'm a communist, just outright, is going up. I think you can reasonably say that Mamdani, at least a lot of the way he has talked about things, is communist, seizure of private property, etc. How do you account for that, like that rise? Because it has risen. I mean, would you agree? Do you see that? It sure seems like it.
My own daughter is a progressive who gave money to these imbeciles. Breaks my heart. She went to Wesleyan and got poisoned. I don't
Why
understand.
Did you send her there, John Stossel?
What happened?
That's really is that the problem?
I didn't send her. She chose the college, and it wouldn't have been better if she'd gone to Harvard. Maybe a little better, but not much. At least other ideas were allowed there. It's just appealing. The wealth disparity seems cruel. Struggling seems cruel. If you don't think about these things hard, and most people don't, because I like David Bowe's answer to this. I know, why don't they? Because people have lives.
Yeah.
Most people are not like us thinking about public policy. They're thinking about food and sex and how to make money for themselves and movies and music and their boyfriend and their girlfriend and their families. And it's only less than 5% of us who really think hard about politics and see that, oh, gee, command and control kills people and makes people suffer. Most people just don't pay enough attention.
Is that, has that, on the flip side, on the positive side, so you've got the Hassan Piker types and the Mamdanis on one hand, the sort of crazy communists. But there is now all kinds of people doing stuff like you and I are doing right now, having these kind of conversations, making good arguments about economics. Even since I first started getting into this stuff in the mid 2000s. There's now a lot of YouTubers, podcasters. I feel like we might also at the same time be going through like a golden age of people that make these arguments, even sometimes not as perfectly as Reason Magazine might. But do you see that too? Do you feel like there's also a lot more ways for someone to educate themselves on these ideas?
Yes, sure. And miseducate themselves because Hassan Piker is good looking and charming. Mamdani is certainly more charming than the Andrew Cuomo. And it appeals to young people. It's a message for your young listeners here. In that when I started in TV to cover a story, we would go out from WCBS in New York in the car with three heavy, almost always union guys in the car: lighting man, sound man, cameraman. They were all carrying 50 pounds of equipment. It would take them 5 minutes just to get out of the car. And it was just painful to get the story done. Now the iPhone, anybody can make a video. It's good. It's more democratic, and more ideas are probably better, except we're getting a lot of socialist ideas.
Is it Nick Shirley? Am I the YouTuber who's been covering the various welfare fraud? I think have you had him on the show? Yeah. I feel like I did. So is he the next John Stossel, an example of like the next generation of John Stossels, Nick Shirley and people like that who are doing this sort of citizen journalism and going out and, they have a certain shtick?
Yes. And you'd think more people would do that. We're giving out trillions of dollars. You'd think more citizen journalists would be checking to see if the money's being well spent. But they have this attitude that government money just is endless and it's not going to hurt us to spend more on this or that. I mean, I'm old. I'm going to croak soon. So I'm trying to hire someone to replace me. And here at Stossel TV, we have a Stossel Fellows program and inviting people we'll train them for 2 weeks and pay them a little to live in New York. And they make a video. A number of people have done this. We're going to have more. But my producer, Mike Ritchie, shocked me the other day by telling me that for every 5 applicants, 4 drop out because they don't want to do the work. They just have this vision that they're going to go pontificate in TV and say cool stuff and bring in some sound effects and picture effects. I mean, Nick Shirley, at least, he walked there. He dug up the government information on where the money was going, and then he went to those places. He did the work, and then he edited some videos. And it takes work to do that. And it takes my group of 7 all week to make a video. It's not just yammering about things. It's true, there are podcasters like Piker who can just yammer and they have an audience. But I think from our side, where you have to explain counterintuitive things like how competition works better than kind people in government planning it, we need more work.
That's been the thing that in the past 5 years, certainly like around COVID, but even a little bit before that, maybe caused it for me personally, like a second wave of like personal revelation, like the sense that how do you have a free society if you have a generation, and I sound like a boomer here, but it is Dad Saves America, that doesn't want to do the work, and also that is so wrought with anxiety that they don't want to they're just sort of psychologically not in a position to take risks. You know, you've had our mutual friend Lenore Skenazy on the show. You've covered this in a lot of really great ways. You know, how do you, what's your take on that? You're sort of intimating it here, just about like there's some, you could just call it laziness or bad expectations about what it means to do a job. But what else have you seen out there generationally?
I see that it used to be you fraternized with your work friends after work. I didn't because I was crazy, but today I'm told the young people say, no, I want work totally separate from my life. I mean, there are these differences. What do they mean? This anxiety is Jonathan Haidt's big story, and he unfortunately wants legislation to ban social media use for at certain ages, which creates a bunch of other problems. My son makes a living going to high schools and speaking about the problems of social media. It's hurting a lot of people. And I see how you get sucked in. My producer told me, oh, stop using your Facebook videos. TikTok's algorithm is even better. And I agree, and I'm hooked, and I sometimes come up for air an hour later and say, wow, where did that go? In that hour, I didn't have any interactions with humans and do stuff that really makes your life better and happier, and it's a problem. But I've also learned that over time, most problems, people figure it out. And they solve these problems, or people's attitudes change, and overall, life gets better.
That basic argument, observation really, because it's literally true. It's literally true that life has gotten dramatically better over time. There might not be a story more difficult to tell people than the optimistic story that the world has gotten better. It is like there's two stories I feel like I've told on in my time doing this show that I can just see. It's like, yeah, this one's not going to rate. It's optimism that the world's gotten better, and worry about the welfare state or the state of the entitlement programs. But why do you think we're just so uninterested as a creature in in a positive story? I mean, it comes back in a way to the journalism. If it bleeds, it leads, probably. But why do you think that is?
It's natural and it's evolution. We grew up in the tribe. where it's evolution in that if you didn't watch out for the tiger, you didn't live to give birth to us. So you are biologically programmed to watch out for risks. And the problem, 9/11, somebody losing their job, it happens suddenly, a factory closing. You can go cover that. The improvements happen slowly. You look at what the big stories were since I graduated. The big story then was Vietnam, and that was a worthy story. But most of the stuff we covered, Pulitzer Prizes to the New Yorker, because Paul Brodeur reported on how people were getting cancer from electric power lines. It's dramatic. It's horrifying. You react to that. That's journalism. Turned out not to be true. That wasn't a story. People living a little longer all the time. How do you cover that? It's not a story. The bad news is dramatic and interesting.
There's is there a sort of archetypal story format that to talk a little bit about the craft that you've found works, or that, like one of the things I remember, so, this is our first episode together, but I've been fortunate enough to have you come to the office and criticize my work more than once. It's all too complicated, John.
I did that once,
okay,
just once.
Okay, fair enough.
You're still angry about that.
No, I love it. It's the best. You were totally right. You've got a gut for stories, for telling a story. What, even from just a media literacy perspective, for the viewer to be aware of this kind of thing, like, what is that? What makes a good story?
I mean, I don't presume to speak for media. What works for me generally, I mean, I keep doing the same story over and over again for hundreds of years. It's government promised this, that happened. It seemed like this would work, but it didn't. Or what most people think is this, but here's what's actually true. The same kind of themes. And so I start with the myth. Sometimes we do people on the street to see what they think. And then here's what people with a little more information say. I mean, the main thing for me is that we re-edit the piece 10 times. And I write a script that I think is just right on, that explains it, and then they cut it, and then it's 24 hours later and I watch it. I thought this was so great. How could I? Oh, this is boring. This doesn't lead to that. That was my problem with your stuff, that I thought it wasn't clear how something led to something else.
Sure.
And then we recut that on how, okay, now it's working. And yet when I watch it again, I don't think it is. And I do it again and again and again until I think it explains something pretty clearly. That's my craft.
There is actually something deeper in what you're just describing from my perspective, which is that, we have this romance with the idea, with the inspiration, but all the action is in the perspiration, in the execution, right? It's that's the thing that that feels like that must be universally true. It sure feels universally true. Do you think that that's a problem in this world, that we have this like romance with an idea, and the brass tacks of actually making something work just takes nose to the grindstone, and trying and failing and trying again, and being prepared to kill your babies in the edit room, or whatever your craft might be, manufacturing, you name it. It's, writing is editing.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And, maybe if you're a happy person, you're not willing to do that, and maybe that's fine. I only did it because my parents, being children of the Depression, had told me again and again, if you don't work hard, if you don't get good grades in high school, you might freeze in the dark. sometimes they would say, "You're going to starve in the cold." And I worried about that. So I was a stutterer and I ended up in this television job, but I kept pushing through, scared. I woke up scared every morning that I was going to humiliate myself on live TV when I got to New York, and I would cut out all the stutters for the majority of the video, but the last 30 seconds, they had you do chit-chat at the end with the anchorman. And I dreaded that for the 7 years until I got stuttering help. But I pushed through it. I went to race riots in Portland, Oregon, where I was the only white guy, and I was scared, but I pushed through it because I had to succeed. If you're a happy kid, you probably don't have that.
This is one of the things, I think one of the issues that has gotten really hard to talk about, is immigration, in the sense that, I talk about it from time to time here, and I'm less. I used to be fully open borders Brian Kaplan, and I'm now more skeptical of that. It feels utopian, and I've become.
I agree. I used to be Brian Kaplan, and now I say, all right, well, having immigrants think twice about how they behave when they're here are good, and laws ought to be obeyed.
Yeah, because I want to hear more about that, because it's interesting that you've gone through this shift as well. But I think I bring it up partly because even with that, it is definitely true that the immigrants in general I have met in this country, they have the kind of drive that you're talking about. I think more the discomfort, the desire to live a better life. And I'm in Texas. I have a lot of friends that are first, second generation Mexican immigrants, and they have that. They have the Protestant work ethic, even though they're Catholic. Is that your observation too? And then we can talk a little bit more about that immigration sort of shift.
Yes. Also, they bring different perspectives, and I happen to be in love with beach volleyball. I would say half the people are immigrants I play with, and it's just interesting how they deal personally differently with things, and sometimes I learn from that. But the drive, absolutely. And it's hard to leave home in Guatemala and to travel that distance, especially when you don't have money, and get here where you don't speak English and you have to find a job. And it's hard. And the people who do that and succeed, they're achievers.
So why, given that, why have you shifted from this? You talked about it a little bit just now, but from a more Kaplan, hey, it's worked great, let them all in, open borders, to maybe not open borders, maybe not let whoever wants to come here come here. What's driven that for you?
Because I've seen what people on the Texas border go through, and that doesn't seem fair. And I respect rule of law. We ought to change the laws so it's easier to get here. Somebody did an analysis to show that if you want to come here legally, if you're an Indian computer engineer, it would take 15 years to get permission. If you were a Mexican laborer, you would never get permission. So we ought to bring it out from the black market and make it legal and have work permits, because Americans are not having enough sex to have enough babies to reproduce ourselves. We need immigrants to just keep the population level and produce things for all us geezers who are living longer than ever and robbing younger people with our Social Security. So we need that immigration, but what happened was just too much, and it's right to have some limits, I think.
This seems like it's part of there's been a bigger shift across America and the West, like Western Europe, around immigration, and sort of you could say identity, like national identity, nationalism. How do you how do you think about like that, the rise of this sense of this sense of nationalism on the right? Let's say, let's focus on folks like Trump supporters and Europeans, Brexit types, people who I think see the transformation that de facto open borders has done, and want something different, want to have their community not change so quickly, the composition not change so quickly. How have you done stories on this? Like, how have you grappled with this stuff that's going on that front?
It's I do more economics. This is a little bit less related than that. I haven't done many videos on that. I mean, this is why the conservatives troubled me. That when I was growing up, they insisted that kids do prayers in schools, and I didn't think that all the kids should have to do Christian prayers in schools, and we shouldn't enforce our values. And being exposed to other ideas makes us better. I forget what your question is, and I don't think I'm answering it.
Are you dodging, John Stossel?
Maybe if I forget the question, maybe I didn't have a good answer.
Well, let's a different way to ask it. Probably a poorly asked question. Is what do you make of the path of sort of the American sort of Republican / right? Like here we are. We're approaching the midterms. Donald Trump's presidency, take two, has been pretty wild, and it's really hard to have a sense of what comes next. So you cover. I think you cover Trump in a very reasonable way. Very fair. You don't where you just I try to do the same. Like where we disagree, we disagree. But like. What's your sense of where things are headed for, the just broad right of center?
I'm mystified. Trump personally is such an awful human being that it's hard to believe that all these people will stick with him no matter what. The right is in love with the tariffs, which they think will help their businesses or help people in America when they won't. These MAGA people, make America great again. That the slogan bothers me. America wasn't great for non-white people many years ago, for women who had to get their husband's permission or their father's permission to get a credit card. Things are better thanks to liberal innovations. And the left is so awful and was going to spend us into destitution. I'm so glad Trump came, and just his mere talking about regulation signaled to businesses, we're not going to crush you. And that made businesses start to try new things and hire people and made us all richer and better off in a million ways. And thank God for that, because nothing, as Hong Kong should have taught us, nothing makes life better than prosperity. If you have prosperity, you can buy the medicines you need, you have options, everybody's life is better. The Democrats command and control ideas, and some of the Republicans are the opposite of that. Trump promised to keep us out of wars. He certainly hasn't done that. He hasn't explained the rationale for how this is going to end. How Greenland? What right do we have to take over Greenland? We ought to have simple principles of limited government, which is that you don't kill people or take their stuff, and otherwise we leave people alone. So we learned in kindergarten, and it ought to be what the president practices. And Trump is a very mixed bag.
How long have you lived in New York City now? How long have you been a New Yorker?
About 50 years.
Yeah, it's as native as that's about as close to native as you're going to get for, and I think one of the things that folks who get really deranged about Trump and his style often don't like or don't get is that he's very much a kind of New York type of personality, don't you think? Like, how would you? What does the non-New Yorker need to understand about Donald Trump from a 50-year New Yorker?
Well, he's hardly a typical New Yorker, but he is more of that New York. One example, when I started in Portland, Oregon, we would do these man on the street interviews for stories. And you wanted maybe 3 sound bites that you'd use. And you'd ask 20 people and you get 3 good ones. In New York, I was shocked to discover you only had to ask 6 because everybody had opinions and was willing to say them. In Oregon, people would say, "Oh, isn't it a beautiful day here?" And they were nice, and it was not that edge that makes for entertaining media, let's say. And Trump has a lot of that. But his selfishness and need to get praise and willingness to lie about everything is disgusting. He's a disgusting human being who, thank God, was elected over Kamala.
It's such a funny thing to hear that all compacted in that he's a disgusting human being who, thank God, was elected over Kamala. Who is your favorite U.S. president of all time?
George Washington, because they asked him to stay for another term, and he said no.
Pretty unbelievable, right?
Today.
Do you think our discourse has actually gotten worse? A lot of people like to talk about this. It's like this thing, oh, we're more polarized, and political discourse is obviously like, Trump's going on Truth Social on Easter weekend, dropping curse words and being crazy. But has it actually gotten worse, or has it always been, just kind of in the gutter?
Oh, that's good. I think it's gotten worse. There was always some stuff in the gutter, but you didn't hear about it. Now we get it in the algorithm. And this is my son's point when he speaks to high schools, that the algorithm is brilliant. It is like the slot machine. It's designed in the same way to keep you pulling that button. And it figures out what you will like a little more, what you'll watch a little more, which is often what you hate and what makes you angry. So if you think black people are dangerous and evil, you will get a social media feed that gives you example after example of that. And it's hard to imagine that, oh, this is just a tiny piece of a huge country with 330 million people. And these are the exceptions, because you just see example after example.
Speaking of your son, I've met your son briefly. I haven't met your daughter, but I hear from our mutual friends that you have been a good dad who's raised good kids. What was that like, and what did you, particularly, you were raising kids in an environment that's particularly difficult, I think, in certain ways. A, you're like a celebrity, TV personality. So we've seen how most celebrities' kids turn out, which is like a complete disaster. And B, you're in New York City, which in itself is pretty difficult. Like, one of the reasons why we moved out was when Lisa and I had our son. We just weren't prepared to be parents in New York. How did you do it? Got any tips, any dad tips for this particular set of circumstances, as rare as they might be? But, there's a lot of people who are in tough, they're trying to raise their kids to be good, and they kind of know there's a lot of things that are going to set them up to not be as good as they should be.
It frankly was easier than I thought in New York City. And that in my kids' schools, all the kids who had 2 interested parents did well. And I think that's mostly what it takes, is having 2 interested parents who show up. And my kids were exposed to odd things. They went to school with Al Franken's kids. I have no great insights, except that I was blessed in my job at 2020 that I had flexible hours. When the school called that the kid was sick and needed to come home, I was able to ride my bicycle over there and pick her up. And she was with other good kids, so I've got no wisdom on that.
Did you give your kids chores? I was recently talking to my wife, and she mentioned that there was this great study, and it found that the single variable for success that they could run regressions on, I think it was Harvard, was whether or not kids had a fair amount of chores growing up. Did you give your kids chores?
Some, but I made them work on summer break, go apply for a job at the flower shop, at the local corner store, and they got that experience. It's funny. The first day I went to the corner store, and there was a line out the door, and I came in nervously, and there was my daughter at the cashier, and at her high-level private school, basic math like making change wasn't really taught. She could do algebra and calculus, but she was so slow at making change for people buying newspapers that first day there was a line out the door. Chores, I agree, is a good thing. I can't remember really what we required them to do at the moment.
I think I did the same thing in that my son worked starting at 7th grade, and we were probably not as good as we should have been on giving chores. And I like just thinking about this last night. It's like, you know what, we probably could have given more chores. That's probably good advice. Give your kids more chores. I like to say, and it's not that cheeky, that I'm in favor of child labor for exactly the reason you're talking about. Like, the sooner your kids can get to work, the better. Would you agree? Do you think it's time to ease up on the child labor laws?
Yeah, the laws are ridiculous. That a 14-year-old ought to be able to work in a safe workplace now. It's not sweatshops that we're asking these kids to work in. And the fact that the McDonald's isn't allowed to employ people it is wrong. I was fortunate before I had kids that 2020, against my will, forced me to do these videos on child issues, the terrible twos, spanking, the problem child, and all that. And from these specialists, I learned things that I think are useful tips. One came from the father of Drew Bledsoe, the football quarterback, who his father teaches a parenting course, which it stuck with me. His slogan, "Don't kick elephants." What's that about? And he said, the point is, if I say to you, "Don't kick elephants," what are you thinking about? What are you picturing? I picture somebody kicking an elephant. So when you want to correct your kids, don't tell them what not to do. Tell them what to do. Don't tell them, don't throw sand in the sandbox. Show them what they can do with the sand. And likewise, coaching soccer, I was taught 4 positive bits of reinforcement. Good using that side of your foot before 1 criticism. Should be 4 or 5 to 1 to keep the kids' morale up.
That's a good piece of advice.
Rivalry problem. It was, in most cases, let them work it out. And then I thought, yeah, let them fight and they'll work. No, you got to protect the little one. So there were many interesting nuances.
Do you have siblings?
I have an older brother. I had an older brother. He died recently.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that, John. May he rest in peace.
Me too.
What did you learn from being in a family with siblings? Because we have an increasing amount of only children, in this country as fertility rates go down? What when you look back on being part of a family and having siblings, what did that mean for you?
He was important because he was a substitute father. My father was around, but he was the strong silent type that was common then. And he left for the factory at 7 in the morning and came back 7 at night and sat in his chair and smoked his pipe and read the paper. But my father taught me about other kids and how to handle things.
You mean your brother?
My brother, I meant to say.
Yeah, it's like this surprising blessing to have siblings that I feel like is a shrinking thing. Do you believe in God?
I think God is possible, but otherwise, no. I kept trying. I've seen that religious people are happier. I want to be one, but I can't get there.
Talk about that. When did you? So would you call yourself an agnostic then? That like a open to the possibility but unconvinced?
I grew up I went to the Congregational church because my mother made me go, and nobody seemed happy to be there among the kids going to church school, and nobody seemed to learn much. I don't know many people who came to be serious believers from that. And once I was old enough not to go, I stopped going. And since then, as a reporter, I was able to try all kinds of cults, transcendental meditation, and this and that. None have worked for me.
Do you think it's important? You said people tend to be happier, and I know the data that supports that, the various surveys and stuff. But I think there's some indication that there's a rising interest in religion, even if it's from a very diminished base in America, particularly around Catholics and Eastern Orthodox, but not exclusively. Have you noticed this? Have you felt any? Has this issue come into your thoughts much in the past 5 years? As this, because there's some things in the water. I personally have felt it, but yeah.
I think there's more of that in the water in Texas than in Manhattan, where I live. We have beautiful churches and synagogues and people who go. And I always feel very free that, gee, on this hot day, I don't have to wear a suit and I can go play beach volleyball while they're inside.
Oh, John, I think that this issue of religion has been one thing that I've noticed, and I bet you're going to not like to talk about the movement, but our like-minded set, libertarian-oriented people. I feel like this has become I've noticed this be a little more a brighter line in recent years between those who sort of draw more energy out of their faith and those who just aren't connected to that. They're either like ambivalent or just outright hostile towards it. What's been your observation of that? Among people who share the sort of belief in liberty, and obviously objectivists have always been quite militantly anti-religion, straight back to Ayn Rand herself. So there's always been these threads. What's your sense of that?
I don't spend that much time in the libertarian movement to know what people are thinking. I think we're a pretty agnostic group. And again, in Manhattan, movement toward God, toward religion is not very visible to me. People live secular lives. They're passionate about music and food. Food is the new religion around me. These idiots obsess endlessly about little differences in food. It'd be better if religion were more around me, but I just don't see much of it.
You've you've you have a signature I've noticed over the years of a kind of confrontation in interviews, and talk about that. Where did you get this sort of you knock people off kilter and it produces results? You know, talk about interviewing people, about how to get people out of their shell.
Well, a lot of people are in an uptight shell. Makes for a terrible video. And to get them out of that, I've pretended to go to sleep. I've said, "You're boring." Because for a video, boring is the worst thing. I can't use it. And sometimes that works. I find it works better with men than women. Women like confrontation less. But it's part of journalism. I should be confronting people. I should take the other side. I do it with libertarians. How can you say we don't need this welfare state? People are in need. It just seems like that should be a basic question you ask if you're doing a story on limiting a welfare program.
What's the most outrageous sounding thing you've done to try to get somebody to break out of whatever, whether it's their talking points or just being boring and stoic? Seeming to fall asleep's pretty good. Do you have any more crazy than that?
Yeah, more than that, snoring and pretending to go to sleep, telling people you're boring me. You were good on the phone, but now you're just boring.
You went through a period of having a beard. It was a brief moment. It comes and goes. But I have not seen a completely hairless face on John Stossel. So why not? Why go? You'll go beyond the mustache, but you won't go full clean shaven. Did you try this once and get such horror from your family that it was like, I have to basically grow it out and never to be returned?
Yes, I didn't have a family then. I just had a wife who kept saying, "Shave off the mustache. I've never seen you without the mustache." And I did. And she said, "Okay, grow it back."
That's the thing. Have you seen?
And I noticed at college when I grew the mustache, women were more interested. So I take it from that. I look better with the mustache. I grew the beard on vacation once, just as a lark. And then I realized that nobody in my family has noticed it, on the principles of nobody looks at dad, or nobody looks at old people. It was even more dramatic when I shaved it off. I shaved off half, and my wife didn't notice for 3 days. With people you're with, it was during COVID, and when you're with someone all the time, you really don't look that carefully. Until I went like this. Do you notice anything different about me? Like this, she noticed.
Oh, that's So what did that tell you about your relationship with your wife, that she didn't notice a half-shaven beard?
That she's relating to the inner me, not the outer me.
How long have you been married?
42 years.
How did you do that?
Well, some of them were happy. And when they weren't, we eventually got marital therapy. Well, I think we would have split up without it. But that helped. That taught us how to fail better in some ways. And we've made compromises. Look, I'm not easy. She's not a libertarian. She's into theater. I don't like theater. And she's got Trump derangement syndrome. And I find that tedious. So there are subjects we avoid. She's not interested in beach volleyball. She's not interested in my football bets. So we come together where we can.
I've seen these different things that say that people are that like relationships across ideological lines is on steep decline. So if your values are important, how do you maintain a loving relationship if you are on different sides of things that you think are pretty important beliefs?
I don't pretend to be an expert except to say find the important values which you share, and try. If for a while I thought if I keep explaining why libertarian economics is just better than what Hillary wanted to do, she'll get it. We do better when I just don't bring it up.
That's pretty funny. just you know what?
No, it's sad. It's not funny, but it's
It is kind
realistic,
of
I think.
sad, John, but so why stick it out? Why stick it out? Make the case.
Oh, I love her. I want to be married, and we have the family together, and we have many things in common. We're invested in each other, and I like waking up next to her and hugging her.
And I would certainly agree that all of that sounds a lot more appealing than if the exchange was losing that in favor of
Trump.
yeah, in favor. I need to be able to commiserate with someone about how much I hate regulation. That doesn't seem like a good trade-off. I would agree. You've maintained a long marriage, not just across an ideological divide, but also in being in the media, which itself seems to have often been a corrosive industry for maintaining relationships. Why do you think that is, and how have you avoided it?
I don't know. I've never liked going out to noisy places after work and schmoozing, and so I generally went home after work once I got married. I was pretty indiscriminate before I got married, and I didn't know if I could stay faithful after marriage. I didn't really think I would, but I have for 42 years. It just seemed like the right thing to do. I don't know.
We met a long time ago, and I remember. Do you remember that? Maybe the second time we met. I think maybe I came on the show. I was living in New York at the time, and you asked me to. I came over to your apartment to fix your DVR. Do you remember this?
I remember having dinner with you and your wife.
Yes, that's right. Maybe it was the same visit.
Don't remember you fixing the DVR.
How would your kids describe you as a father?
It's so arrogant to try to answer some of these questions, but it's the title in your show, Dad Saves
You signed
America.
up for this, Stossel.
They would say you were, my daughter would say, you have bad ideas, and I'm going right to the negative. It's my instinct that, like, I can't talk to her about climate change. She would start to cry. She says, Daddy, I'm not going to change my mind. It's pointless. We're just going to be angry with each other. I want to argue about these things. They would say I was a good dad because I put the time in, and I really did. And I was good at inventing simple games for them to play and crawling around the house and blowing up balloons to teach hand-eye coordination and being playful. What they would say, I don't know.
One of the things as we start to wrap up, I know you've got it. I can torture you for an additional hour if you'd like, but I don't think you have the time. You have been incredibly prolific, and you've gone through several waves, and you were on network, 2020 network at its peak. You had a great show on Fox, and now you are a YouTuber. So what has it been like to move from the old school media to the new media and become a YouTuber at a time and in an age where a lot of people actually sort of retire, and you are not doing that. You went the opposite. You're like Benjamin Button of media. So what's this been like for you?
It's wonderful, especially compared to having bosses and having people tell you what to do and having a TV program that had to end on 3 seconds before the hour and having lawyers review your work. One standing out now, I play poker with him sometimes. He said, "What do you mean rent control destroys cities and makes apartment buildings work? You can't say that. I live in a rent controlled building. It's great." Now I get to do what I want to do. And I don't call it a YouTuber because until Facebook censored me, we got more views on Facebook, and we have Twitter and TikTok and
True.
Rumble. And
yeah, you're on all the
when
things.
we release a video, goes to all the things. So I'm a social media person.
Yeah.
And
You're an influencer,
nice.
John. You're an influencer.
An influencer. If I were a 16-year-old girl selling makeup, I would make more money from advertisers. But yes, we're reaching about 3 million people with each video, and that feels good and feels freeing to be able to go as long as we want to do. One of my longest was Edward Snowden, and I know nothing about national security and foreign affairs. I says, really? What am I going to talk to Snowden about? It was by Zoom. He was in Moscow at the time, not knowing what was going to happen to him. And he was so interesting and smart. We ended up talking for 2 hours and ran that. It's one of my more watched YouTube videos. And the freedom is great. And the freedom to ride a bike to work. And if I retired, I don't know what I would do with all that time, since I don't want to go to opera and the theater. That's what old people do in New York. Also, the technology has made it so much easier that I don't have to come into the office every day. I can lie in bed. Producers send me a rough draft of something they're proposing, and I can just do it from bed, back and forth. I could stay in bed all day and do much of my work if I wanted to. So technology makes so many things better. It certainly has made my work life easier.
What's your take on artificial intelligence? For me, it's the first technology. In so many ways, I love everything about the technology and the progress and the things that it can do. But it's the first time I've had a technology actually scare me a little bit about how quickly it might change things in ways people can't adapt to. What's your gut tell you about where we're headed with this?
Well, my gut is useless, but my brain is telling me that, is this true? Is this the first time for me that I've been scared about something? I think we're scared about every new thing. That when cell phones came and someone said, you're going to get brain cancer, brain tumors from the cell phone, the media destroys that. I was scared of that. I was scared of Y2K. When the year 2000 comes, all the computers are going to break down. I've often been scared. Now I have learned that by and large things work out. AI may be different in that maybe the computers will decide that, we're just in their way and we can't learn as fast and we're using resources and they'll just kill us. So it is a possibility that it will get out of control. But then I look at the hundreds of scares I've covered, one after the other, and all of them have proven to be nonsense, not to be the thing we were worried about. Take job loss, for example. Look at the job loss we've had from innovation. These MAGA Republicans are so ignorant to say it's trade, it's taken. No, it's innovation. Telephone operators, thousands of them, secretaries, millions of them, elevator operators, all those jobs gone. Unemployment is lower than it was before. People find other work. A guy who won the Nobel Prize said, an expert in this area, said, the first job that's going to go from AI is radiologists. In 10 years, there'll be no radiologists because the AI is just better. And the AI is probably better. And we find it makes mistakes often when I use it for writing scripts. Producers check everything. It often makes mistakes. And yet I'm stupidly inclined to trust it totally when I check medical stuff. And it does a beautiful job reading radiation. So he said there won't be radiologists 10 years. Well, it's now 10 years later, and there are more radiologists. I don't know what they do or what's different, but somehow they found other work like the elevator operators did.
It's speaking of radiology, you battled cancer. You're still here, thank the Lord. What was that like? What did it teach you?
I don't like the phrase battle cancer.
I knew you wouldn't like it. That's why I said it.
Well, people battle cancer in horrible ways. I didn't. They found a thing in my lung. They removed the largest lobe of my lung. We have 5, but the body has enormous excess capacity. My other 4 lobes do the job perfectly well. And they plucked the thing out, and it was a difficult time for a month, but that's gone. I get a scan now and then. It may come back, but something's going to kill me. I'm almost 80 years old, and probably won't be that. What it mostly told me, just the stupidity of what happens in the medical system. That first they give you all the forms to sign that you understand this. Forms like on the internet. I've read this and I agree to it, and nobody reads it. No. This is one more horrible example of how lawyers and lawsuits wreck life. They just give us all this stupid crap to deal with that doesn't help people.
That basically forces us all to repeatedly lie that we've read things we haven't and that we understand things we don't.
Force the lie. And some people don't invent better things because the lawyers tell them, well, this might happen and this might happen. And so all the money goes for that. And the other part is that the only thing that really makes things work better, and that's why business is better than charities, which are better than government, is competition. So you have to show results. And in medicine, there's no real competition because you don't pay the bill. What makes a market work was when you pay your costs. And I get Medicare now. When I go to the doctor, nobody even discusses costs. Nobody says, is there a cheaper place to get the MRI? Or do I really need the MRI? You just do what they tell you because the insurance company pays. And the insurance company pays, again, because of government. Because idiots during World War II decided we got to have price controls, hold prices down. And companies then wanted to keep their workers or wanted to find new ways to make money, so they would improve a product. And one way to keep workers was, we'll pay for their health insurance. We'll pay your medical costs.
Yep.
And there's no reason the company pays your medical expenses. They don't pay for your food. And so there's no market. There's barely a market in medicine. Where there is for things that are optional, like cosmetic surgery, things get much better. The waiting rooms are nice.
Yeah. The dentist's office.
Movies.
Yeah.
There's a TV set on the ceiling for the kids, so they practically go into a coma and the dentist gets to work on them. And the techniques are better. It's less painful than it was when I was a kid. But where government is involved, nothing improves.
I asked this, first of all, I just love that I asked you about your cancer and it was a libertarian answer. That is about as perfect a way for us to come to an end of our conversation, John, as I could imagine. I ask this of every guest the first time on the show. I hope we can have you back. Next time I'm in New York, I hope we can do it in person. And you'll think, why? We already talked too long as it is. We called this show Dad
Nice to talk to you.
We called this show Dad Saves America because I think that's a role we play as men that matters and that actually expands out from your family to the community, to the country. It is a thing we do that makes the country better. It's one of the many roles we can play as Americans. How do you think about your role in the American story?
I don't. But I do. It makes me think about dads versus women and moms. And I came of age at the time the feminist movement was blooming. And boy, it was a good thing. And it was overdue. Things were really weird that men did this and women do that. But what Gloria Steinem argued, and I had one interview with her, where I said, aren't there some differences? Like, don't women in general nurture better? No. Next question. But there are differences. And as dads, we are more playful. We encourage more risk taking. My wife, to her credit, I would say, when my daughter was 5 or 6, says, I can't parent her because you intervene so much. I used to like to just stand back and see what she would do and save her if it was going to be dangerous or make a suggestion or two. Well, my wife was always saying, well, you want to do this and want to that? And we fought about that. And she said, well, then just take her from me. Go to the YMCA and join the swim and gym class or something. And I did. And that was great. And I got together with 5 other fathers to have lunch with the girls after that. And we'd take them to a restaurant and they would play under the table. And sometimes once they flooded a ladies' room, that we'd left them on their own much more than the moms would. And they gained from that. And the women have patience and nurturing skills that far exceed most of us guys.
Yeah.
So thank God that women do most of the parenting, and we are different, but both roles are important. And kids who have 2 parents playing different roles, I think, benefit.
John Stossel, thanks for being on Dad Saves America. This has been a lot of fun, and I have been basically giddy the whole time because you are one of a handful of people that had a truly profound impact on me, on my formation of my own beliefs. Your book, Give Me a Break, really was like what is it? I'm lost for words, but the scales came from my eyes in a very real sense when I read that book, and it was at a pivotal time.
No, I'm so happy to hear that. That book is about the scales falling from my eyes.
And so this has been an honor and a privilege, and I hope to have you back.
Thank you, John.